First, we'd like to ask you if you'd be happy to share this extract of the discussion on the website
Yes, that's fine.
and to transcribe your responses to users' data.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. Are you a student, teacher, or lecturer, and from which country?
I'm a lecturer from England.
Okay. Thinking about the overall DLab project, can you describe what you've gained?
I've gained a lot of knowledge about how to use digital technology in lots of different ways and combinations. So new apps and new tools and new ways to put them together to make interesting lessons and products and approaches. I've learned lots about the theoretical background, so I used to be able to do things practically, but now I know a bit more about the theory that is underlying working with digital technology. And I've learned lots about how other countries approach using technology to support learning.
How do you think your involvement has impacted or will impact on your own practice?
I suppose it's made me choose digital tools more often, whereas perhaps I would have tried to use a pen and paper or maybe a computer. I'll now use an iPad or an iPhone to do things. To say the question again?
How do you think your involvement has impacted or will impact on your own practice?
I suppose also maybe kind of using social media to keep in touch with people in other countries and kind of looking wider for ideas. So not just looking for ideas in where I work and in my country, but going further than that, perhaps.
Have there been any particular challenges?
I think sometimes time is a challenge, that I'd like to do more, but I can't do as much because other parts of my job need to be done as well. So there's always things that I'd like to do more of or join in with that I can't always do as much as I'd like.
Okay. Firstly, have there been any benefits or challenges of teachers, lecturers and students working alongside each other?
I suppose there have been challenges that we've tried to overcome. So sometimes language can be a challenge, but because we all have got to know each other, we're quite happy to ask and try out words and try out how things sound. So we're learning from each other. Sometimes maybe the technology that we might suggest, oh, let's use this for this activity, but maybe it's not available to everybody everywhere. But that's sometimes to do with the devices we've got, not the countries that we're in. So we might choose an app, but it's Apple, and then not everybody has an iPhone or an iPad. So that's not countries, it's something else. And going back to the previous question, I sometimes have a challenge because my students aren't the same sort of students as everyone else. They're not teacher training students, so it's sometimes harder for me to work in what we're doing with what they are doing because it doesn't quite fit in the same kind of way.
Have there been any benefits or challenges in the planning stages and in the classroom?
Lots of ideas in the planning, and I think when we look back at the planning, we're going to see that as a big, huge resource. So if you're stuck for ideas, you can scroll back through the planning and pick up on things that you didn't do and have a go at them or look at different examples. So lots of the planning we've done, it's not just plans, it's photographs and videos and digital things that we've created. So we've got a huge, huge resource bank to draw upon as people who've been making things, maybe, and then we've got the layer of people who've worked with us in the MOOC who've added their ideas. So it just gives you so much to kind of go back to and look at and use in different ways. And that's maybe more readily available than if you had to go to the library or if you had to start from nowhere. It's all there to look at.
Have there been any benefits or challenges while making the MOOC or within the international days?
On the international days, we've sometimes found it a challenge to use whatever tools we're using to keep in touch. So we've sometimes had to Skype, and then we've had to call again and again and again, all the way through break time, and we're thinking, is this going to be ready before the children get back in? And sometimes it hasn't been, and we've had to find ways around it or kind of the children are disappointed that you can't have the usual conversation. So it's sometimes to do with technology and how it works in different countries, and how strong your internet connection is. So sometimes that kind of technical stuff can get in the way of all your good intentions and your determination. So that's in the classroom. And also in the classroom, when we're trying to collaborate live, there's often a mismatch of times because there's a time difference, and there's also a difference in times of when break and lunchtime is anyway. So sometimes that is, you've got to do lots of planning to overcome that and actually find the bit of time when you're all in the classroom and you can all be in touch. So that's quite hard. So that was the international days. What was the other bit of that question?
Making the MOOC.
Oh, making the MOOC. No, I think making the MOOC is a really good opportunity for us to actually work together and talk and not have to be kind of separated by, it's great on Skype and sharing documents, but it is easier for us to be at tables working with each other, and, that works very well.
On the perspective of student teachers, how does D-Lab way of working compare with their regular training experience?
Well, I think it gives student teachers the opportunity to be a member of a team composed of lots of different sorts of people. So experienced teachers, other students from other countries, the people that are teaching them. Everyone's working together in a very level kind of way so that everybody's ideas are just as important as everybody else's. And sometimes that's quite unusual. Often for teacher training students, they're in university and academics are telling them what to do. They go to school and teachers are telling them what to do, and they're not always in an equal position to say, well, this is what we think is important.
Focusing on the school pupils, do you think there's challenges and benefits, and how does this way of working compare with their regular lesson experience?
Well, I think from the teacher I've been working with, particularly, and maybe this kind of goes for the rest of the school, I'm not sure, it's sometimes hard that we've got ideas and we want to kind of spend the whole day working on them or spend an extended period, but there's so much pressure in the rest of the curriculum and assessment demands that it's hard to say, okay, well, we won't do that, we'll spend the whole time doing this. So although the kind of goodwill and kind of enthusiasm exists to do it, there are often things working against that in the school because of certain times of year or certain year groups. So, for example, if it's year 6 pupils or year 2 pupils at this time of year, so that can be a challenge. There is more we want to do than we can actually do because of the constraints that are on schools. So that was, tell me the question again. I've forgotten.
Focusing on school pupils, were there challenges or benefits, and how does this way of working compare with their regular lesson experience?
Well, I think the benefits were that especially if you are able to work really well with the pupils, that it is a completely different way of working. So it would give them more ownership on what they're doing and more independence, so they could maybe try things out and really be creative, potentially.
Can you identify which aspects of the D-Lab project have been most useful for you?
I think making connections with other countries, because so many different ideas and expertise to draw upon there, kind of beyond my immediate environment, and particularly learning from all of those people in the way they use digital technology and the kind of their creativity and the way they bring it into lots of lessons and experiences. Probably that.
Is there anything you'd do differently?
I don't know. I think possibly when working with the school, it's really important to, thinking back to when I was in school as either a teacher or a head, I would maybe want to have a much more long-term plan so that I could clear time for when it's D-Lab and say, okay, during this week we're having an international day and these are the bits of time in this week we're going to be having the freedom to work on it. So maybe it's a whole day here and half a day before and half a day after. And in schools you have to kind of make that happen in a long-term way. You can't just go, oh, it's next week, right, okay, we've got to do this. That's really hard. But if you sit down in July and look across the next year and go, okay, that week and that week and that week, and then you can plan other things around it, and it's not imposed on top. It's an integral part of what you are doing, and so your teachers don't feel like it's like this extra thing that you have to do, but it's actually a really important part of what you are doing.
And lastly, is there anything you would like to add about your perceptions of the impact of the project?
No, I've got a lot of enjoyment and job satisfaction from it, so it's kind of made my job come alive in a different way than it had before, and I found absolutely loads of experiences and ideas from the experience that I've been able to put into my teaching to make it a better experience for the students.
That's all. Thank you very much.
Okay. It's